Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle. Sam and I here today. We're going to talk about the three ball. This is probably a 30, 45-minute conversation before we actually jumped on. Sam and Lisa and I were just talking about 3-point percentages around the country and how it affects the game. And we said, let's take a little bit of a turn here and let's talk about this because we were pretty fired up about it. We were talking about the three ball, the effect it has, how you utilize it. I actually think this is maybe one of the most important things you have to figure out as a coach is what is our dependence on the three ball? How do we want to maximize our potential from there? How do we want to stay away from it? How do we want to defend it? But so many games are affected, even if it's not just makes and misses. The strategy of the game is changed, affected. It has a big outcome on how you guard, on how you're guarded. So maximizing the use of the three ball, defending the three ball, everything around the 3-point line is what we're going to talk about today. Now, I know some people could be like, oh my gosh, this thing is overplayed. The 3-point ball, there's too much of it going on. There's some people that are like, hey, that's the way of the game. Let's talk about it, Sam, the three ball. You shared some interesting stats with me, which started this conversation the other day. But let's help coaches understand how they can utilize it and how they can defend it.
Yeah, so should I just start out with some of the stats that we had shared? So there's 10,000, there's 1,080 teams across roughly Division 1, 2, and 3, men's and women's. And on the men's side, TJ, only 10 teams out of 1,080 shoot 40% or better as a team, which is phenomenal, right? And then on the women's side, there's only two out of that, and there's none at the Division 1 level on the women's side. So that's an interesting stat, right? And that kind of jumps off a lot of talking points and thoughts. To break it down one step further, on the men's side, 4 teams at the Division 1, 4 at the D2, and only 2 at the D3. And just for our audience, like Yale leads the country. They're 21-4. St. Louis is second. They're 25-2. Miami, Ohio, they're 27-0 at third in the country. And then Liberty's 23-4. So there is a correlation. How if you can put a team out there that shoots the three, you're gonna probably put yourself in position to win more games.
Yeah, and so I think let's break this down. I know I've talked to some high school coaches that use analytics a lot, and I talked to some high school coaches that don't use it at all. I mean, there's different access and different things, but there are some basic stats that I think can help you understand. I'll just talk about our team for a minute this year. Like we were winning. Actually, we started out losing a lot of games, and we've turned it around, and we've been on a really good run here lately. And three balls played a huge impact in that, but maybe not the way people would think. But I think a stat that people need to understand is this, and this is from my dad coaching me in high school, understanding that 33% from the 3-point line is 50% from the 2-point line. I think that's a really important thing to understand. Now, sometimes we're chasing that like it's gold, and therefore we shoot a really low 3-point percentage and go there. But I think that's an important stat because when you go down to the 4 factors that help determine games and what wins and what loses, and we've talked about this before, but that effective field goal percentage number is an important one to know. Like what effective field goal percentage. So not what you are, just your overall, how many do we make, how many do we miss, but factoring in the 3 is essential in today's game. And we're in in Division 2, we're up in the 90th percentile in effective field goal percentage. And last year, I think we were third in the country in effective field goal percentage. And this year honestly, I love my team and less talented, less ways to score than we've had in previous years, but still in the 90th percentile of effective field goal percentage. And I think a lot of that has to do with utilizing the 3 ball. And so we do want to talk about this. And I think those stats are pretty staggering. I think the golden goal for a team in college is, can you shoot 40% from the 3-point line? And very few achieve that, right? But even shooting in that way of like 36, 37, like those are big numbers because that goes to 50 plus field goal percentage, effective field goal percentage, which is going to help you to win a lot of games.
Let me say something real quick on your point there, 50 and 33. So what TJ means, most people know this, but just want to set the table. If the blue team plays the white team, TJ, and blue shoots 100 shots, and they're all twos and they make 50% of them, they score how many points? 100 points. I think that was a blue team. If the white team shoots 100 threes and makes 33 of those threes, they score 99. That's where you get the equivalency, right? So if the white team just scored 34%, they would win the game on shooting 16 percentage points less. So it's kind of just a breakdown of the stat.
Yeah, and I think it's an important stat to know. Now, look, we could go a lot of different directions with this, but I think a lot of people chase that number and that stat. I think players like looking for the three ball, and you go in there and they're trying to make a lot of threes. But there is a lot of possessions wasted. You have to take into account. Well, we passed up an easy two for a three, right? Well, because we're shooting a ton of threes, we're not getting to one of the other factors, which is a large determining factor on whether you win, which is free throw rate. What's the rate we get to the free throw line? So you're not putting that much pressure on the rim. So I'll go ahead and like jump to the conclusion, and then we can kind of break it down a little bit. But the conclusion would be this: is are you shooting? Are you putting pressure on the rim? And there's a lot of ways, paint touches, people talk about it different ways, but are you putting pressure on the rim? Because if you're putting pressure on the rim, you're likely to be able to get some twos, which you want high percentage twos. That's a great shot. You're putting pressure on the rim, you get to the free throw line, which is a great opportunity for your team. And then if you're putting pressure on the rim, you're going to get inside out threes, which is going to lead to good threes. Those are made at a much higher rate than threes that are just passed around the perimeter. And so one of the biggest mistakes people make is just equating like, well, the three is a great shot because it's, if you make 33% of those, it's the equivalent of 50 or 33 and a half or whatever. It's the equivalent of those. But then they start chasing what I would call fool's gold, and they just start shooting and jacking all of these threes. And you look back at your percentage, and this is a regular film session for us every preseason and early season. Like, I want our guys to have the freedom to cut loose and shoot threes. But then we go back and we shot 33s in this game. We shot 18 of them that never touched the paint, and we go 2 of 18. And then we shot 12 that touched the paint, and we go something like 5 out of 12, or something, which is a good solid percentage. Like, you'll take that 5 out of 12. But the other one you don't. And so not all threes are created equal. But essentially what you are hunting is a good mix of both of those. I equate it a lot to football. Like, there's football teams that air it out left and right. They just throw the ball, they go, and great stats, but don't win. And there's other teams that just ground and pound, and like they control the clock, and they win some and they don't win some. But what is the hardest football team to beat? And where do you feel like as a defense you're just scratching and clawing to figure things out? It's a team that can effectively run the football and throw the football. And I think that's the same thing. And I think 40% typically happens to teams that have the ability to do both, not just a good shooting team.
Yeah, so TJ, I think another part of this conversation is important for us to unpack a little is 3-point rate. That's the percentage of shots that come from your three pointers, right? So, for example, Alabama is a very analytically driven program. Nate Oates talks about that a fair amount. They shoot, TJ, 53% of their shots are from the three. Now there are like 14 teams at Division One that shoot 50% or more of their shots. In the NBA, to give you an example, the Golden State Warriors lead the NBA and they shoot 50% of their shots from three. And so I think 3-point rate, not all high school coaches, maybe not even all college coaches know their 3-point, but I think it's a part of knowing your team, knowing your offense. Where do you want your shots from? There's a lot of different ways to win basketball games. Um, and so the 3-point line can be a weapon. And we shared some stats with you how it can be a weapon, but you don't want to just shoot them to shoot them. Our good friend Josh Merkel, they're number one in the country, I think, at D3 right now. They don't shoot a ton of threes, and he knows that, and he's good with how they win games. They shoot a good percentage, they just don't shoot a high rate. So, yeah, what would you say to that?
Well, I think knowing your team, because I think this can be really misleading. I think there's a lot of teams that get beat because they shoot a high rate.
Yeah.
And so I think what you need to determine is the right rate for your team. So I mean, I know that for us, we're in the 94 percentile. We're at 48% of our attempts are threes. And honestly, at one point in the season, we were struggling. I said to my team, which is an easy sell, but we had to go back and sell it, exactly what we were looking for. I said, we have to shoot more threes. We don't finish well. We have to shoot more threes, but we have to get quality threes. And so we spent a lot of time on like having to do that. We needed to equalize the game. We're small. We typically lose the rebounding percentage. And we needed to shoot more threes. We wanted our rate to go up. We were at about 43% rate, and we got up to about 48% rate down the last 18 games.
I remember texting you and saying because you have three pretty good shooters in your starting lineup, right? And I remember saying, "Man," he's like, and you're like, "Yeah, actually, I'm trying to get us to shoot more. I'm trying to get to 50%." And you were on that pretty early with your team this year.
Yeah, and I think for more reasons than just that is like I think that if you're a real threat from the 3-point line, like shooters have gravity to it. You know what I mean? Like there's a guy like Steph Curry that has just gravity to him. There's a lot of easy layups they get because people are chasing Steph off of a screen and somebody slips on the backside. I think that's the unintended consequence, and we want that feel is like we'll shoot the open three every single time, and then all of a sudden your shot fakes get more effective, your drives get more effective. There's one particular team that's really good in our league, and they try everything to take away the three. And that's going into a game. Our game plan was like, listen, we need to utilize how much we want to shoot the three, but we really need to be more aggressive at the rim and up our free throw rate in this game. And so you get bigger driving lanes. We try to get more of our best player in ISO situations getting downhill because they're going to hug so much. And so in that particular game, our goal wasn't to shoot more threes. It was probably to shoot less threes, but it was to use the gravity of the three and the way the defense would adjust to be able to get us more stuff at the rim. And so I think that the assumption, which I see happen so much, we just need to shoot more threes is a bad one. How we're gonna get those, and why they will affect the game, and how we can utilize them to help our offense is more important than just the idea of we're going to shoot more. I think you have to know how they fit in the totality of what you're trying to get done.
And maybe this goes without saying, but the what here is nothing special. Like it's one thing for a coach to walk in the locker room or preseason and say, "Hey, we want to shoot a lot of threes." Well, I think players could follow that instruction, right? And they're going to shoot more threes. But the specialness or the secret sauce in it is like, how are we going to create these threes? So it's not just shot selection, it's shot creation. And then also, are you having those conversations about who needs to be shooting them and from where? And then how are you going to create those actions to get them, right? That's where
Yeah.
the real coaching is.
Yeah, and so Sam, I would this might help coaches here. I think offensively, and we've been highly effective offensively for the last several years, and like top 5, 10%, even higher sometimes offensively. And here's something that I think might help coaches. When you think about how do we attack zone, okay, like you have to have your offensive mind going, like, how do you attack zone? It doesn't even have to be the same as like the way that I think, but you have to have a pecking order to your attack mode. And so, and we do this at our PGC summer sessions and our PGC coaching, we talk about this all the time. It's like, number one is like, we have to have a plan to puncture the middle. How are we going to get the ball in the middle? The ball needs to get inside so that we can either, because if you go out there and you see the Spurs teams, you shoot a bunch of threes and they don't make them that day, and all of a sudden a team that's inferior beats you because it was all you just shot threes. They were there and they happened and you just took them. So we need to know how can we get twos? How can we get inside out three? So how do we puncture the middle? So that means like, are we going to ball screen the top and drive it in there? Are we going to X out the two post players and throw it into the post player? Are we going to revolve and have a cutter leave and exchange every time, like the read and react where you hook and look? Are we going to, I don't know what you just have to have a plan, like to get it in the middle. Everybody's going to have a different plan. You got to have a plan to get in the middle. That would be our first step. All right. Now we have the next 3 steps. We have 4 steps in attacking a zone. They're super important to us. But the same applies to man. When you go back in there, you don't go in and say, we want to shoot 40% from the 3-point line. Let's do a bunch of shooting drills and let's get better at shooting. I think shooting 40% from the 3-point line starts with how do we get rim pressure? And everything builds out from that. And so, the old Don Myers, like, give me a post player that draws a double team and 4 people around him that can shoot, and you're going to win a lot of games. So the way that they would try and create 3-pointers and good opportunities is a post player that, if single covered, could score at a high rate, and if double covered, could pass it out and get open threes, right? That's one way. A more common way, and Villanova started doing this with 4 out, 1 in, and they started going in, they started penetrating, they got kick, and then they created theirs off of getting penetration to the rim and guards playing off shot fakes and getting in there and kicking and making 1 extras. And a lot of teams have done that for a long time, but Villanova was really great at it. And they kind of put that 4 out, 1 in, around that. Now some people do it through the 5 out universal. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But at the end of the day, how are we going to get the ball with some rim pressure that's going to allow us to get good inside out threes? And you have to determine that. And my team and your team might determine that differently. But I actually think the teams that start with how are we going to shoot a bunch of threes and make them are the ones that actually have a really low winning percentage. I think you have to go the other way.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I think I think also, I mean, you transition threes is a like I think it starts even there too. Like transition, you got your half court. But let me flip it around to you for a second. On defense, TJ, what are you more comfortable with? Do you want to protect I know the answer is I want to protect the rim and I want to protect the arc. But typically it has to start on one side. Like, would you say you're more of a coach who wants to protect the paint and the penetration or getting in the paint, or are you trying to guard the arc first?
Well, Sam, I think this is a super interesting stat. I read an article on this maybe 2 years ago. In the NBA, teams that try and take away the layup can have a really high success rate. Teams that try and take away the three can have a really high success rate. The teams that were the worst teams in the NBA over, I don't know if it was 5 to 8 to 10 years period, were the teams that tried to do both. And so I think the most important is you're committed one way or the other. Like, you're committed to not giving up whatever it is you are committing up. So for instance, for us, we're going to go try and help the penetration, and we're going to try and chip down on the low man, and we're going to give the kick out three to to the opposite side. That's what we're committed to first and foremost.
Hmm. Okay, so say that one more time. Your focus is to start where and then go where?
So our focus would be, like, let's say somebody drives on penetration, right? Our focus would be to stop them, so give help. And
Yeah.
then our next would be to help the helper on the backside for a chip down layup rather than scatter out to threes, right? So we're not trying to give up threes, but if we have to give up one over the other, like, we're trying to take away twos. And a big part of that, honestly, Sam, is it's really kind of like hidden, is if a team is not getting, like, if we're getting good help early and they're having to make hard passes out of there and we're not giving up layups, right? Then they know that they have to grind it from the 3-point line. But if it's really, the problem is when you're giving up both. And that's when you're like trying to take away this and trying to take away that. That is a real problem. So I just think you need to be committed to one or the other. And I don't think one's greater than the other.
Yeah, and I would even, and I'm sure you do this, but I would even talk a lot about containing the ball. Whoever your on-ball defenders are, do a really good job so we don't have to be in constant help, constant rotation. I think I heard Brad Underwood, Illinois, talk about this earlier in the season. So I'm sure somebody will correct me if I misspeak here, but I think they made a conscious decision, like they flipped it and started focusing on protecting the paint and not giving up paint touches and rim at the rim stuff, and where they were more arc oriented. Again, I could be wrong on this, but and it had a pretty profound effect on their
Well,
defense and improving it.
yes, I think, and so, Virginia traditionally defended the 3-point line really well in their pack line defense, and people didn't think they would, because it was all about protecting the paint, right? I mean, a little different than I just described. I mean, we force baseline and we help and help and help. Their goal in the pack line was to not let penetration happen from the guard help. And so you would think, because we're always helping from the guards, teams would shoot a higher percentage, but in reality, they were preventing paint touches, and teams were shooting a lower percentage. And it seemed to a lot of people be like, well, like you're open, there's open threes. Like, why aren't people shooting a higher percentage of it in Virginia? They didn't let it get deep enough to get paint touches, and they gave quick closeouts. And Virginia was really, really effective, and not because they were hugging the 3-point line. The opposite of that, they were helping a lot from the guards. They just weren't giving paint touches up.
Yeah, so we may have high school coaches listening and being like, well, college, TJ, you can recruit shooters, or NBA can draft or trade for players, and all that's true. And so what does a high school coach says, man, I want us to be a good 3-point shooting team. I want us to be the best in our conference, our region. I think what we would tell them, and you can piggyback or push back, is like, you can develop shooting teams, you can develop shooters, but you got to have a plan, you got to have systems in place where they get a lot of shots up in season, off season, where you measure it, you track it, you celebrate it, you coach it when bad shooters shoot too many shots. So I think you can also, yeah, if you're a coach listening, like, you can do this, you can develop good 3-point shooting
Yeah,
teams.
I would say this, Sam. Like, I think there's a lot to unpack there. Like, I watch my daughter plays girls high school basketball, and I would argue that, like, shooting the three, I'd rather develop that than the layup for some girls. And I know that sounds crazy, but here's the reason. Like, you have to develop their ability to drive the ball. You have to develop their ability to make a read. You have to be, and the number of things I see with girls when I watch them, that because maybe they don't spend much time on it, that go in there, and honestly, probably truthful in guys too. They go and they drive, and before, like, they travel on the takeoff because they're not great at driving, you know what I mean? Or they go in there and they make a bad decision and they turn it over, and then they're not great at finishing, and they get there and they miss layups. I've seen a lot of girls just be more effective. They would be better off just learning to shoot the three, catch and shoot. It's worth more, right? There's not the chance of the turnover and everything happening in between. And I would say that you should maybe put some more time to that. I think guys, maybe a little bit different in the sense that, like, guys already want to jack the three, like they're in love with it, you know what I mean? And so they overdo it, overshoot it, and they think they're better at it than they actually are. Probably a little inflated ego, and they're thinking, I made 1 out of 10, but I remember that one. And so there's a little bit of nuances in coaching girls and guys and what shots you're looking for. But I do think that the big takeaway is understanding how to create those good threes. And the you said, college coaches, NBA, like, you can recruit players. There's a flip side to everything, right? Like, you're right. We can go find some really good shooters, but in reality, in all honesty, a lot of times those really, really, really good shooters that we get lack some quickness, lack some defensive ability. Like, you're giving up different things when you recruit a certain player a lot of times. And that's just, I think, the nature of it. I mean, some players at a young age have gotten by with their athleticism forever, and so they didn't develop their skills and their shot. Some players didn't have enough athleticism to make it. The only way for them to make it was to become a good shooter, right? And so a lot of times when they get to college, you're recruiting one or the other. You're giving up something. We may take a really good shooter. I got 2 or 3 really good shooters on my team, but they can't get into the paint. And so there has to be a mixture of your ability to put pressure on the paint and shoot the ball.
Yeah, it's a good point. The explosion in the 3-point shot, a lot of people before the Warrior, I mean, this is my take, is before the Warriors won it, TJ, the consensus was you live and you die by the three, and that teams that shoot a lot of threes usually can't consistently win. And the reality is, you got to be good on both ends. You got to be an efficient offensive team, an efficient defensive team. I've watched a little more college basketball this winter than I have in previous because of my schedule. But to me, there's 3 teams in Division One men's right now who are the best teams. They're top 10 in offensive and defensive rating. Can you guess who they are?
Offense and defensive rating.
These are 3 teams to me that kind of stand out. There's other contenders.
Michigan, Arizona, are those two of them?
That's 2 of the 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting enough, they do it. I mean, they do it a little differently, like with the way they use the three ball. And looking for a third one. Shoot, Florida maybe.
Duke.
Duke. Oh yeah, Duke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Florida's not far off, but yeah. And so going back to the Warriors, you're right. Like Clay and Steph weren't known for like great defenders. Clay was an above average defender, I think, what most people would say. But they had complementary pieces, though. You had a Draymond who was a Player of the Year defensively, and so you're right. I think you have to balance those pieces, well. And if you put multiple shooters on the floor, do you have other complementary pieces too?
I think one of the best things, we go back to this all the time, but like honestly, our offensive track, I love it, and I know it sounds like we're promoting here, but I really mean this. I love our offensive track. We have a lot of good tracks in our PDC coaching. I love our offensive track because I think it focuses on everything you need to be good offensively. Specifically, like what shots are you hunting, like shot generation, like what shots are you generating, which is as a coach a challenge for you. And I think role identification, like what we're talking about here, that has a great deal to play in your field goal percentage. And so, are we generating good shots? Are they in good role identification? We have a bunch of other things we go over there, but those are big pieces to going back and building your offense and thinking, am I helping my team generate the shots that we need to? And this is going to morph from year to year. But are we actually, does my team know what we're hunting? And are they hunting it on every possession or most possessions? And then the next one's shot selection. And there, if we hunting, are we taking the right ones? Because there's a lot of teams that they simply beat themselves on shot selection. I see this happen over and over again, and we do it every once in a while. To be honest with you, I think we get beat for different reasons, but less than the average team, we get beat because of shot selection. And there's some teams that give great effort and they do a lot of things, but their shot selection is just no good. And it makes it tough for them to overcome a lot of things. So those things combined, I mean, when you think about, are we generating good shots? Are we selecting and taking the good and the bad ones? And do we understand our role and helping that come together as we break that down on our offensive track? I honestly think that's gold. Like if you find a team that is good at generating the right shots for their team, which is our job as a coach, help them generate it, and they're hunting those. And then we go back and they're turning down the bad ones and taking the good ones. Oftentimes, giving up good for great is where you get separation as a team. And they understand their role in helping that happen for the team. You got a chance to maximize your offensive potential. Now, look, your ability, I don't know your ability of your team. And so what the max potential for your team is different, obviously, based on your skill level and the number of players you have that can shoot it versus can't shoot it. But our goal as a coach is to be able to give our team the best chance to reach their ceiling, and you can't do it without those three things we just talked about.
All right, I got a couple of questions I think that for you to answer. I think this may help coaches listening. If you have a 40% 3-point shooter on your team, which I think you got three guys in the high 30s right now. Okay, you got the third leading scorer in the country currently. And so you've coached a lot of good shooters, but how many threes do you want your 40% 3-point shooter on your roster shooting a game?
Okay, this is a loaded question, Sam, and let me tell you why it's loaded. Because I want my average 3-point shooters to shoot 40%. And I want my best 3-point shooters to hover between 35 and 39 if possible. And here's why. Is because your percentage really comes down when your mid to average shooters shoot bad threes and they end up shooting 30% and 28 and 29. But if they're shooting two a game, if they're mid, but the two they shoot a game are great threes. They're wide open, right? I think they can go 40% if they're pretty decent. But if they sprinkle in two or three bad ones, then they're going to be down in the low 30s. So I think they need to shoot there. Now, my best guy who have had the same shots as that mid-level player, if he was open as much as that person was and had those looks, they'd probably shoot 45%. But they don't get those looks.
Sorry, you're conceding then that your best shooter is going to have to take one or two tough shots a game, which is going to drop
Exactly.
them. Yeah.
Exactly. Now the problem is if your best shooter takes two or three tough ones and you have three other players on your team that are not as good at them, and they take two or three tough ones, that's where your percentage comes down. And so that goes back to the role identification.
So, okay, but I'm still going to hold you to answering this question in a second. I think that's it. That's interesting. Okay, yeah, I wasn't expecting you to say that, so that makes me think a little bit. Because your big man right now has only shot 43s on the year, and he's shooting 50%. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
So
And so
that
the
remains
assumption,
true.
no, the assumption there is people would say, like, well, they need to be shooting more. And I'm okay with him shooting more, but I'm okay with him only shooting quality ones. Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, whereas I think 43% for him, and we've got a guy averaging 24 a game, and 36% from him, I think are equivalent. I think
Yeah,
that's the same.
and so all right, yeah. So and Devin, your third leading scorer in the country, he's going to take some end of clock shots that were tough. Like that's just kind of part of it. Like and so that makes a lot of sense to me. But so back to like even your three shooting guards, your three starting guards, would you say you want them taking 8 a game a piece? Or you?
Well, so a certain number, I would say this. I would say I like the 50-50 mix. You know what I mean? And so, like, where those come from percentage wise, each player, depending on how they guard them or whatever. Like, I feel a defense gets stretched when you're a true 45-55, 50-50 team. You know what I mean? Like, you might shoot that. Like, that's a good mix for me. I like them to not know, which one do we need to pay more attention to. So as a team, yeah. And so, like, with our guards, if we're going to shoot 60 shots, I'm probably going to generate, maybe, 6 to 10 from our bigs and our mid late range shooters. You know what I mean? The guys that are okay. I want 6 to 8 good ones, like wide open. We set a back screen. They went with Devin on the guard. He's sitting naked at the top of the key. We want to take that one. They want them to feel the pressure of that. Even if we don't make it, I want them to feel the pressure of that. I like, and so, yeah, so they are probably going to take, 24 threes, 22 threes, somewhere in that range over the course of 60 possessions. And look, here's another one, Sam, I think is really important. If you, somebody was talking to me this other day, there's a really good player. She's a girl, and she's playing college basketball, and she's really good at getting to the rim and finishing or whatever. She was having a great first half of the season. And then everyone just started like corralling, bucking her, backing off, doing whatever. So the coach was like, gosh, what do we do with this? And I said, she needs to shoot 3 threes a game. And she needs them to know I will pull that. Even if she doesn't make it, there's some gravity to it. And they think, oh, she will shoot it. And if she just goes 1 out of 3, which is 33%, that's good. What it does is frees up better drives. We used to do this with KJ, who's now in the G League, and he was a great driver, great finisher, and he was passing it up open looks. And I would say, KJ, you have to shoot this 3. We need them to know that you will pull that, even if you don't make it. Like, and I would tell him, I want you to shoot a 3 in the first 2 minutes of the game, every game. Why? I want it in the back of their head. I don't care if you make it. I don't care if you miss it. I want it in the back of their head.
Yeah, that's good. So, all right, that kind of and your three guards do they're all in the 6.5 per game range. Just on what I pulled on your stats. All right, so again, back to coaches listening. Just want to make sure we're serving them. Like you have this player that's a really good shooter. You decide, hey, I want them shooting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 threes a game, whatever it is. How are you thinking about how much of that are you going to run? You're going to have a couple set plays for the shooters. Are you going to how much of that are you going to talk about the actions that lead to that? I know some of this just kind of happens naturally within whatever offense you run. And then I'm assuming you're talking every day in front of the team, or if not every day, weekly, about who's shooting these shots.
Yeah. So Peyton Manning, I think, was one of the best to ever do it. Tom Brady, like take what the defense gives you. And so shot selection trumps all of that. And having a certain goal, I think, is a little misleading of like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Like we're not going to do that if a team just sells out to taking away the 3 and we're getting great driving lanes. So I think that's why shot selection is so important. What is the defense giving us? And obviously I'd like to go into a scouting report knowing what they're giving us. And then I want to look at that and I want to say, how do we need to generate some threes? Like what will generate good looks for us here? So like if they want to deny Devin all over the court because they don't want him to touch the ball, I'm going to use him as a screener early in the game, and we're going to get some back screens, and we're going to see how committed you are to not leaving them. And we're going to set some back screens and try and get some layups and see if that doesn't shake what you're trying to do a little bit. Because every time he sets a back screen and we get two layups with nobody around, then the coach starts thinking about, well, wait a second, maybe we do need to help on that back screen. Maybe we do, so I think that, and look, if they don't want to help, I want us to take 60 back screen layups, like that's what I want to take. And so I don't want to take any threes. But obviously, it frees up over the course of time, and you're thinking about how do we create the best shots for each individual player based on what they're going to do defensively. And so that looks different every game on how those shots get generated. But I do think it is important. We don't necessarily have to figure out how to generate a shot for everybody because most teams are going to just take away your one or two best players out of what they want to do. So most of the time, it's how do I generate my best players good shots over the course of a game.
Are you this late in the season? Are you running certain actions early in the game to see? Hey, I want to run this high ball screen with Devin. I want to see, do they trap us? Do they switch it? I just want to see what they're doing, and then I can make the adjustment. But you've already thought about how you're going to play each of those scenarios. Not only have you thought about it, again, I'm saying a statement question here. You've probably gone over, hey, Devin, if they're trapping you, this is what we're looking for. If they're switching, this is what. If they're going under, you're shooting. Like I'm sure you're kind
Yep.
of. Yeah, go ahead.
100%. I mean, usually our first 2 to 3 plays a game that we run are just checks. We have an idea of how we think they're going to guard us. We're just checking to make sure that's how they're going to guard us. So for instance, we're going to run some sort of back screen play. We're going to run some sort of, back screen, down screen play. We're going to run a ball screen and we're going to see, for these two players, how do they guard the ball screen? How are they guarding the back screens? And, we know sometimes going into film, but we want to see if they're making any adjustments. So they have a different game plan of what we're doing. So it might be like, hey, let's go, back screen into a side ball screen. Let's see how they guard the search side ball screen. Be ready for the trap. Let's pull it back and short roll it and attack off that if they do. And if not, let's just run our offense. So we go like, let's just take a look. We think they're going to trap. We think they're going to pressure that ball screen. Let's just take a look at it real fast. And that gives us an idea of, hey, all right, we want to be in this alignment more. We want to be in a naked ball screen on one side because of their trapping, or we want to be in a middle ball screen because of their trap. Like it just gives us good information.
Yeah, and I know we're kind of throughout this conversation talking like offense, but back to maybe 3 point for a second here. I think what I would say, TJ, to coaches listening is, knowing you want to shoot threes is great. That's where the game is moving towards. Shoot more threes, more at the rim, less mid range, right? I think most people are the three best shots in basketball are layups, free throws, and 3 pointers. But I think the real thing, what we're trying to say is you got to think about how are you going to create those shots and what's your offensive principles, actions, what set, all that stuff. That's where the magic. But you don't have to have it all figured out, but just starting to think about it and having some sort of plan around it will help you be a better offensive coach.
Yeah. And, I know we jumped around in a lot of different things, coaches. You probably got to compile those notes. I think the big takeaway from this is you do need to spend some time thinking both on the offense and the defensive end, the role of the 3 pointer, right? And it doesn't mean, like we talked about, it doesn't just mean like shooting those, but how are we going to create them? How are we going to take them away? How, it has a big impact on today's game. And you've got to start thinking on how that affects your philosophy as a coach. And hopefully we gave you some good ideas, some good takeaways on things that you can think through and ways you can use it to your advantage, where the 3 point line, both on both offense and defense, is something that we know how to utilize, manipulate, take advantage of during the games, and how to build our offensive philosophy and defensive philosophy around. Because if you're not thinking about it, then you're in trouble because the game has changed and it's a huge part of the game. And in many instances, it's too much a part of the game, right? In some instances, it's not enough a part of the game. But you do have to think through that, what part of it is to you and to your team. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit us up at hardwood_hustle. Like always, if you want to check out some more resources, pgchustle.com has those for you. We'd love to see you eventually be a part of our PGC coaching family where we get to go even deeper on this stuff. But we appreciate you listening. Hopefully added some value and maybe some questions you might have to think a little bit deeper on when it comes to three-pointers. He is Sam. I am TJ. We are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Coaches, if you're looking for some in-season support or a more direct approach to your development in all facets of coaching, join our PGC coaching community. You can sign up for a free trial today by going to pgchustle.com/trial. That's pgchustle.com/trial. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.